What's up guys, I'm Lee Morris with Fstoppers.com, and before me here I have the 15-inch MacBook Pro. I just bought it today. It's the newest one that they have. And then of course this is the brand new Microsoft Surface Book, which is a really incredible laptop by Microsoft. It has some pretty interesting features that we'll get to in a second. But for this video, I just wanted to talk about the actual design of both of these laptops. I am a Windows user. I have never owned an Apple computer in my entire life, but I'm also the first to admit that Apple products are absolutely gorgeous. They seem perfect to me. And when I go into an Apple store and I pick up one of their laptops or an iPad or anything, it just feels so good. It's like the most beautiful electronic hardware there is available. And every time I pick up a Windows laptop, no matter who has made it, it feels so cheap and crappy, and it's just, there's no joy in using a Windows laptop. It's just a work machine. And I understand that, and I have many Windows laptops. We have a ton of Windows desktops here, and I don't sit there and stare at the way that the tower looks on my desktop computer. But at the same time, I can appreciate impressive design. And that's why I'm so excited about the Surface Book here. I just want to show you guys my current work laptop. This isn't a joke. This is a new Alienware laptop. I think I bought this less than a year ago. And this thing's ridiculous. It literally looks like my dad's laptop from like 1995. It's stupid. Everywhere I go with this, and there are Mac users and they see me using this, they literally think it's a joke. They think I am playing a prank on them. And I'm like, no, this is a real laptop, but it's cool because it has a graphics card in it and it's really fast. It's not elegant. I wouldn't use the word elegant to describe it. It's insane, really. It looks like a child designed it. It's made of cheap plastic. The whole thing flexes. The bezel on this thing is like insanely big. The thickness of the screen itself, like this isn't a touchscreen computer. The thickness of the screen is insane. It's like thicker than my iPad, and there's no technology in the screen at all. It's really ridiculous. So you can imagine that as a Windows user, when Microsoft announced the Surface Book and how absolutely amazing and beautiful this thing was, I was very excited, because if I have to spend a lot of money on a computer that I'm going to be working on day in and day out, I want it to be beautiful. So I thought I would go over some of the different features and the hardware and the design of each of these, and I'm going to be as unbiased as I can possibly be. I am here to admit that I have never seen a laptop come close to an Apple laptop in terms of the design and skill and the amount of effort that went into actually creating it, but I myself don't own one, and I don't ever plan to actually buy one. So let's first start with the way that you open this thing. And I've been told by somebody who is an Apple fanatic that every single Apple laptop, no matter how big or small it is, you can put your finger right under the lid and lift it with one finger, and it's perfectly balanced all the way up. That's beautiful. And when you look at the MacBook, their really thin laptop, it actually does that too. I was just in the store buying this today, and I thought, this thing will never be balanced perfectly. Guess what? It's perfectly balanced. If we compare that to my Alienware laptop here, you can see the whole thing kind of come up with it. Cheap, it sucks, okay? Let's test out the Microsoft Surface Book. Now, it has a magnet in it that grips a little bit. If you can get past that, then it's quite nice. But the problem is, it reaches this point on the hinge. You can see here, the way this hinge works, it's very easy coming up, and then it reaches a point and it gets stiff. Now, obviously you're going to argue, well, of course, Lee, it's not going to be balanced because it has the processor and everything behind the screen. I completely understand that, but we're just talking about the design and the way that it works right now. If we talk a little bit more about the screen and the hinge, you'll also notice that this thing, it vibrates a little bit. So if you're using this thing, it is going to vibrate. Let's check out the Apple laptop. Because the screen is so small when it comes to the actual size of the screen versus the thickness of the actual base, it's much better. Obviously we have a little flex there a little bit of vibration, but it's nothing compared to the Surface Book here, which really can bounce all around. I can imagine, I haven't tested this at all yet, but I can imagine if you're in a bouncy car or you're on an airplane, this thing bouncing around might be a problem. I haven't tested that though, so who knows. Let's move on now to the keyboard. My Alienware laptop has a pretty obnoxious keyboard. I'm not a big fan of it, but I'm just gonna type around on their keyboard a little bit. The Apple keyboard does have a very particular sound. There's a little bit of like chatter and vibration on the keys. Like if I just run my hands across the keys, there's almost like this fraction of a millimeter play where they move around that doesn't happen on the Surface Book. And the clicking sound on the Apple computer, it's very different. It's the type of thing that it's certainly louder on the MacBook Pro, but it's also kind of a pleasing sound. I don't find it super obnoxious. The Surface Book feels a little bit more muted. It feels like the keys are softer, or what's underneath the keys is softer. And instead of this like clickety clackety, it's almost like rubber on rubber feeling. You can hear it's kind of clickety clackety as I just slide my fingers across, and then here's the Surface Book. Totally different. Here's me typing. And the MacBook Pro. I have to say, like, obviously this is the first time I've ever typed on either one of these computers. I think both of them are great, but they're so different. I can definitely see why a Mac user would like this very specific sound and feel. It is really nice to work on, but I can't specifically say that I think it's better than the Surface Book. Both of them feel really good. I'm gonna say this is a tie. Next, we'll move on to the touchpad on both of these. And one thing that has haunted Windows computers is that the mouse just doesn't work. One, it doesn't feel good. The way it clicks doesn't feel good, but then the scrolling doesn't work well and it's never smooth. And that's probably the one thing that I've wanted most, that I've seen all of my Mac friends have, is like this great touch experience where when they scroll, it's just super smooth and the animations are super smooth. It's not this jaggedy motion that you get with the Windows computer. And I have to say, feeling the trackpad on the MacBook Pro, it feels great. It's kind of similar to a touching an iPhone or an iPad or something like that. It's got a little bit more texture to it, but it feels great. And the animations, like I'm scrolling on a web page right now, it feels really good. The Surface Book, I gotta say, it feels very, very similar. And when I go to a web page, especially if I'm using Edge, their new browser, it finally feels like, man, I actually have a laptop that works the way it should. All of the animations are smooth. The two-finger scrolling works every time. Absolutely love it. I can't really say one is better than the other. We'll go into the actual clicking. This laptop is the newest one, and it has the Force Touch, where it has like 2 levels of clicking. So you can click once with just a little bit of pressure, and then click a second time with a little bit more pressure. And in all honesty, as a Windows user, it kind of drives me crazy because I don't want to click at all. I just want to tap on the touchpad. And I believe you can turn that on. But I have to say, the design of this touchpad and the way it feels is amazing. The fact, like, I'm pressing at all different corners. It's really hard to explain this on film, but you know when you just feel a button on something that's designed really well, it just, it feels so good to press it. And this is one of those things that's like, oh my gosh, how did a human being make that so perfectly? It's really amazing. The clicking on the touchpad on the Surface Book, not quite as good. Like, I'm gonna take my mic off so you can hear this. Here's the Surface Book. Sounds kind of cheap, and then you see that? And I see my sound guy listening. He's like, oh yeah. Now listen to the 2 clicks here. 1, 2. It's amazing. Let's go through some of the ports here. If you look on the right side of the MacBook Pro, what do we have? We have an SD slot, HDMI, and USB. I assume it's USB 3. Let's look just on the right side of the Surface. This is something that's a little bit interesting with the Surface Book here, is it has a magnetic power cable just like the MacBook Pro, and you can put it on either way, which is kind of cool. But the weird decision that they've made is when you put it on this way, and I don't know if you can easily see this, it blocks the port for the mini display port. So if you were going to use a monitor plugged into that, you would have to plug this in this way. It's not the end of the world, it's not a huge deal, it's just a strange decision, and it doesn't feel like something that Apple would have done, because when I see their ports, they probably just would have removed the port. That seems like something Apple would have done, but they wouldn't have allowed somebody to be able to cover a port with one of their own power cables. Again, it's not that big of a deal just to flip it, but it's worth mentioning. On the left side of the Surface Book here, we have 2 USB 3 ports and an SD slot. And on the left side of the MacBook Pro, we have 2 Lightning ports, which is nice, and another USB. One strange thing that you will notice, but we'll get to it later, is that the headphone jack on the Surface Book is way up top here. So if you're listening with headphones, you're gonna have this cable that's always gonna be running across and hitting your keyboard. But we'll see why they had to do that in a second. On the bottom of each of these units, they have little rubber pads. On the Microsoft Surface Book here, they have these pads just running along the top and bottom. And then, of course, on the MacBook Pro, they have these 4 little feet. And they're not really rubbery, but I think it's just so you don't scratch up your table. And I don't know if you can see this, maybe on this camera you can. This unit has completely destroyed this glass table that we have here. I don't know why. It must be this hinge that they have. When I open it up, the hinge hits the glass table, and then when I move it around, it actually scratches the glass. So that seems kind of like a big deal for some people, depending on how valuable the tables are that you're sticking this on. I don't know that it's permanently scratching the glass, but it's definitely leaving marks all over the place. When it comes to screen size, the fact that the Surface Book is a little bit taller than your average widescreen current laptop bothers me only when I see it next to the MacBook Pro. I didn't notice that it was taller than other laptops until I put them side by side, and then I thought, oh, I kind of wish that it was wider. But I don't think that it's as tall as like the old laptops that you're accustomed to back in the 90s. And I don't think it'll bother you if you purchase this and it became your main laptop. So let's quickly talk about the finish on both of these. The MacBook Pro is made from aluminum, and I believe the Surface Book is made from a magnesium alloy composite. And they both look like they're metal. They both look like they are made of aluminum, but they're actually not. And if you actually start looking at them a little bit more closely, you will notice that the MacBook Pro is definitely shinier. It's a little bit more reflective. And when you touch it, I'm having once again a hard time trying to explain this on video without you guys just being here and able to touch it. But it feels like the MacBook Pro is made of aluminum. You know, if the computer wasn't on and you touched it, it would be cool to the touch. But when you feel the Surface Book, it feels like plastic. but it's also very rigid. So it's not at all like other plastic laptops that you're accustomed to. It feels like metal in the sense that it's rigid, but it feels like plastic in the sense that it's not cool to the touch. And if you slide your fingers around on it, it just feels more like plastic than the MacBook Pro. I don't know. Listen to the sound here as I scratch both of these. This is the MacBook Pro. Kind of sounds like you're rubbing metal. And then this is the Surface Book. It sounds more hollow. I don't know how to explain it. It's definitely the best Windows laptop that I have ever held in my hand, but at the same time, I can't honestly say that it's as good as the MacBook Pro. I just have to be honest. Now let's talk about this weird hinge that's on the Surface Book. And you'll notice that when this thing is closing, first of all, it creates a gap that you can look through, which is a little bit strange. But also, why did Microsoft even need to make a hinge like this? Why wouldn't they just make a hinge like the MacBook Pro there and have it be a little bit more rigid and easy to use? Well, the reason is because this is an actual tablet, and there's a battery and there's a processor and there's RAM and there's the hard drive all in this top unit. And if they had a normal hinge, this thing wouldn't be balanced at all. You can imagine if this screen was slid forward a little bit, what would happen was it would just tilt back and fall. So it's pretty genius what they've done, because when you close it, it lines up here on the edge, but when you open it, it actually moves the weight of the entire unit back a little bit and makes it balanced when it's on a table. That's pretty incredible when you actually think about how much work went into creating such a complex hinge. To remove the actual tablet part of this, you can press this release button on the top here, and you hear a little click, and then you just grab the edge and pull. And this is when this unit really comes alive and becomes something that's really, really impressive. This feels so light. It almost feels too light. And the reason I say that is because it feels a little cheap and hollow. And it has to be somewhat hollow because they need to get airflow through there. And if you notice on the edge, there's air ports all around this entire thing. So it's the type of thing that it's incredible because it's light, but if you've ever felt like an iPad and you feel how thin they are, but still how solid they feel, this does not feel like that. It feels much lighter to me, and it's still relatively thick, but it's absolutely amazing that this is a full-blown, really powerful machine. The way that this works is, there's a battery in here that lasts about 3 hours. You have a processor, hard drive, RAM, everything you need to actually run Windows on this top unit. And then the bottom unit here is obviously the keyboard, but it also has a much bigger battery that supposedly adds 9 hours. And it has a GPU. So if you're playing video games or you're using software that can use GPU like Adobe Premiere, it's going to really help you out with that, make things run a lot more quickly and a lot more smoothly. Now, the first question that I had when I saw this thing was, oh my gosh, is this going to be able to replace my iPad? I love watching videos on my iPad, for instance, on an airplane. And the problem with the way that this is designed is that the top unit only has approximately 3 hours of battery life. And we haven't tested that. I can imagine it's not going to be 3 hours if you're doing anything really processor intensive, but 3 hours is barely good enough to get through 2 movies anyway. So my question was, if I have this and I remove it and I'm watching a movie on it and then I put it back on the base, but I don't have a power outlet, will it recharge the screen that's on top? And I was able to ask one of the guys who actually designed this unit, and he told me no, it cannot do that. And the reason for that is every time you transfer power from one battery to another, you're actually going to lose power, which obviously makes sense. But the problem with that is, if you run the battery down on this top tablet unit, and then you just want to spin the unit around so that you can use it in tablet mode, let me show you how that works. If you wanted to do that, the second you took it off, the whole computer would shut down because it would lose power. But if you do have enough power, you can flip this around backwards, flip this down like this, and then you can use it with all 12 hours of battery life in tablet mode. Obviously, it's much more heavy now, but still a really cool option. So Patrick over here is bringing up a good point. Why wouldn't I just use it in this configuration to watch movies or whatever? And I certainly could. It's just way heavier than a normal iPad when it has the entire base and everything on here. And sometimes I just like holding something in my hands that's really light and easy. So it's give and take. Obviously, this isn't made to compete with the iPad. This is a completely different unit. You could do anything with this, including video editing, editing pictures, playing really complex video games. So you can't really compare it directly to the iPad, but at the same time, you have to be honest and say, it still may be worth bringing the iPad along with 10 hours of battery life in such a small package. So here I have an iPhone, and this is a battery case on the iPhone. And I use this every single day. I never take it off. And when my iPhone gets down to like 20% by 5, 6 p.m., I just flip the button on the back and it starts charging my phone up again, and I don't have to plug it in. That's awesome. And that's what I was hoping that you would be able to do with the Surface Book. You could use the top unit, run the battery down, and then once the battery wore out, you'd be able to plug it back in, it would charge it back up again. That's not actually what happens though. Now, I want to talk about the power bricks really quick, because this may seem like something that's really not important at all, but I think it is, because you have to carry these things around with you everywhere you go. And when you put these side by side, I have to say, the Surface Book is a clear winner here. Not only is it smaller and easier to use, it also has a USB jack on it. That is so awesome. So I was able to actually use this to charge my Surface Band, the little watch thing that they recently made. And that's really convenient. I wish Apple would do something like that, but they don't. One other thing that you might be wondering is, how does the sound compare out of both of these units? The speakers are actually inside the screen or the top unit of the Surface Book. Obviously, you want to have sound as you're walking around in tablet mode, whereas the speakers are huge in the MacBook Pro, and they're actually on the base. So I assume that the MacBook Pro would be much better and much louder, but that's not totally true. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to play the same YouTube video at 100% volume on both. We'll start with the MacBook Pro here. And we'll move to the Surface Book. I know you guys listening to this are probably having a hard time figuring out which one sounds best. I'll tell you that there's no doubt the MacBook Pro sounds best. The MacBook Pro has a much more full sound, and I'm not one to ever listen to music on my laptop. I would always have headphones or plug it into a stereo, but it definitely sounds much more full. When you listen to the Surface Book, it just sounds cheaper and more tinny, but at the same time, it has to, because the speakers are so small right in the edge of this thing. At least they were able to make it so loud. I think when you're in a really loud situation and you need to be able to hear what your computer's doing, you'll appreciate the louder speakers in the Microsoft Surface Book. So at the end of the day, there's definitely not one clear winner. Obviously, many of the features in the MacBook Pro are more polished, and I'm the first to admit that. But at the same time, the MacBook Pro cannot come apart and become a tablet. That's absolutely amazing. So you just kind of have to pick and choose what's most important to you. But I do have to say that the Microsoft Surface Book is probably the most sleek and elegantly designed Windows laptop that I have ever seen. It's also the closest in build quality and beauty to the MacBook Pro. It's something that I definitely would be proud and not ashamed to carry around. It's certainly a little bit nicer my 1995's looking Alienware laptop that happens to be new. This is how they come. Now that we've gone over the basic way that each of these units works and looks and feels, we're actually going to put them through some benchmark tests, some real world benchmark tests. I'm not going to download some weird program to do it for me. We're going to be using Photoshop, Lightroom, and Adobe Premiere programs that we have to use every single day as professional photographers and videographers, and see which one of these laptops is actually most powerful. You can click on that video right here, and also you can subscribe to our channel because we're gonna be doing a lot more videos with the Surface Book and many other photography related products in the near future.
To see more videos just like this, visit fstoppers.com.